That's right. Well, we're here with Mario Gutierrez, and we're super excited to have you. You I think are our last person that we're talking to prior to the big events of next week, which is Thames 25 in Austin with Bitcoin Park. Uh, should we dive right into it? Who are you? What are you up to? What's going on?
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks, Rob. Um, Mario Gutierrez. I'm sitting down here in Houston, Texas, right? So we're about to get real hot and swampy as we're heading into the summer here. I lead business development at Giga Energy. You guys, perhaps in the Bitcoin space, have known Giga kind of from their flare gas, flare mitigation roots, which is how I came to know them. And kind of right now, we really serve to kind of help the space grow from an infrastructure perspective. So anywhere an electron flows, Giga plans to be there, and we also do that in regards to site development as well. Oh, I saw my screen go out. Oh, there we go. Um,
Oh, you're here with us,
yeah, great.
Mario. I'm wondering if you could catch me up because I've known
Yeah,
I've known Giga kind of since the beginning, right? Since
yeah,
they were starting with the containers, modifying C cans and building out air
yeah,
cooled. And so much has happened from those days
yeah,
to today.
yeah.
Giga is a substantially more broad strokes comprehensive organization now than it was then. What have you become? What have you mastered? What has Giga really been doing these last couple of years that they become best in the industry at?
Yeah, I would. That's a great question. I think last, if we kind of took a snapshot of last cycle, it was these great videos of Matt and Brent putting out a flare somewhere in East Texas, right? And kind of everybody getting really excited about that. And while very exciting, kind of the more exciting evolution of the business has been, kind of in a world that tends to not be thought about as much, but is really, really the backbone of Bitcoin mining, which is supply chain and infrastructure, right? And so as the organization, and this is kind of when I started to become more involved with scaling their off-grid operations, through the COVID era, through kind of just in general, being able to source equipment fast enough to go deploy those projects was one of the main challenges. And so through that experience, coming back to your word mastery, we definitely kind of landed in a place where we felt comfortable now offering the market the solutions that we were kind of making for ourselves, and that's kind of been the thesis at the company that attracted me there was first for us, then for Bitcoin miners, and then for the whole world. And so that's really
Hmm.
expanded to kind of what Giga is today in 2025, where we, if you look at our, CCAN, modular Bitcoin mining containers, we are our first customer for those, right? Same with the Hydro, same with transformers or switchboards or whatever it may be. There might be a utility or a Walmart that might need that switchboard as well, but we were the first ones to kind of use it for us. And so that's kind of where Giga's evolved to now is much more of an infrastructure company. Obviously, definitely recalling back to the oil and gas roots that kind of got us there in the first place.
It's really interesting to me that a lot of organizations in the mining space have quickly found out, and it sounds like you're expressing a lot of the same idea, which is that they've quickly found out that the area that you can master if you stay only in this really specific slice of Bitcoin mining is actually pretty small,
Yeah.
but you can be extremely powerful if you combine Bitcoin mining with these other elements like the supply chain mastery or building other certain types of electrical infrastructure. Does this mean that you're now entering a world that is sort of a traditional industrial sourcing world and you're adding kind of a Bitcoin spin to it? Is that what it looks like in practice?
That I really like how you framed that, and the short answer would be yes, right? I think from a Bitcoin mining perspective, the ethos is, be as needed to get to the solution where you need to go, right? So you don't need all the bells and whistles. There's no reason you have to wait till next week to start tinkering and troubleshooting and getting a solution, right? That's very much within Bitcoin because, every moment you're not hashing is an opportunity cost that you can't get back. Right there's that those blocks are being the blocks are going by, and there's no going back there. And so that's really resonated in the traditional world, right, where they're getting lead times or solutions that are kind of legacy driven, right, and based on expectations that they have, but based on their financing and their needs. and we're asking why not? Why can't we go faster? And right, and so the same way that we build out our own project for our own Bitcoin mining needs, we're offering kind of those same timelines and solutions for to everybody else, and that's been a lot of fun because then you end up talking about Bitcoin. People go to the website, see the history, and then they're like, "Oh, we're buying this transformer from you. That's great and dandy, but tell me about Bitcoin. Educate me here." And so that's been a lot of fun. Um,
I love hearing that. And from a personal point, you mentioned this idea of, you're in Houston, that's the
yep.
heart of a lot of Texas oil and gas industry. What brings you into this picture? How do you start to make the connections and decide that you're interested in working and expanding this vision?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin intersects with people in different kind of entry points in their life, right? And for me, it was definitely in the oil from an oil and gas perspective. I come from a third generation oil and gas family, and
Wow.
I during my had kind of been aware of Bitcoin at the fringes, right, during my before I started my professional career. But when I was working in the technology sector at ExxonMobil, that's when I saw Bitcoin mining kind of in front of me. I saw the Crucial pilot while I was there, and that kind of redefined energy for me, right? And it kind of really kind of reset kind of how the energy ecosystem was working because now you had flexible demand. Right. And then so,
Right.
particularly for the oil and gas world, a lot of the legacy problems around flare mitigation, gas marketing, production optimization, all these topics that we'll really dive into next week when kind of chatting with 360 and Halliburton, which is an amazing thing to be even able to say that Halliburton is working with Bitcoin miners, right? Amazing, amazing. That's what really hooked me, right? And that kind of got me to kind of kick me off into this world and started doing some projects in the off-grid side of things and some on-grid things, and really kind of coalescing around the hype that existed here in Houston, where you could feel the energy of all these kind of wildcatters and entrepreneurs that you were either
Mm.
locking down land and interconnects or trying to put deals together with generators and kind of really diving into that cooperation that it kind of is the backbone of Bitcoin mining, right? Where we're all kind of competing to put projects online, but hey, if you can help me with this here, that's in the spirit of the space as well.
It's a big pie, isn't it? There's a couple of things racing through my mind. The first one is third generation oil and gas family. So, do you talk to your elders in the family and they look at you like they get it immediately, or do they look at you like, is Mario a little touched? Has he
Yeah,
lost it?
yeah. For a good minute, the family definitely kind of looked at me as a little bit of like the black sheep, right? Because I was coming to talk about the same oil and gas problems that they were working on, but by trying to like put it through the lens of Bitcoin mining, right? And I have a lot of cousins and uncles who are engineers, right? And so they're trying to think about how can I have mobile power generation to get the secondary production going even more efficiently, like all these topics, and
Hmm.
and then of course there's cost, right? The oil patch is used to paying 2 to 3x kind of retail energy costs because it's a means to an end to getting the oil out, and
Mm.
so at the beginning, the kind of all the noise around kind of all the shit coins and cryptocurrencies and kind of all like all that thing kind of tends to kind of be the first thing they get they drawn to. But once you see an ASIC and once you kind of see the system and like almost touch see feel, which we got some opportunities to, they get it. It's almost like it's like it's almost magic in that regard. And so they're very
Yeah.
curious. A lot of them kind of ask me a lot of questions when they see either Bitcoin go up or they see some companies start to do something with energy, production. It's definitely a conversation I didn't think I would be having with my uncles in Colombia, right, when I go home for Christmas every year. In that regard. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. It's so interesting, having had experience in the oil and gas side myself with upstream data,
Yeah.
and of course being familiar with Giga,
Yeah.
and then having this more broad perspective in, tiny, tiny, tiny home heating
Hmm.
implementations to, megawatt size mines, which is huge for a consumer, but tiny in the scope of,
Sure.
a large pub. So it's always interesting to frame what the opportunity is in the oil and gas sector
Yeah.
because I think as Bitcoiners, we see something and our immediate reaction is the entire universe will just trend towards it and it will immediately become,
That's right.
the Bitcoin standard of oil and gas, and energy will now be priced and had,
Right. The
we're good at
petrofat,
the
right?
big
We're going to sell
picture
our
thing, right?
oil and for Satoshis, right? And all that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we oftentimes miss the what you're describing, which is the really, really low level. You have to get the engineers, you have to get the businesses, you have to get legacy companies like Halliburton to touch and see and feel, understand what the heck is going on.
That's right.
In that vein of thought, how do we characterize the actual opportunity in oil and gas when it comes to Bitcoin mining? Because there's always this sense of, flare mitigation, but flare mitigation isn't the whole picture. What does the picture look like?
For sure. My in my experience, and I'm sure many of our peers perhaps could chime in with a variation of this answer. Um, you want to talk about the core business of the oil and gas company, right? And what they're trying to achieve. Yes, they'll think the flare mitigation solution is awesome. They're happy to go see it. But if it's not actively affecting their P&L, right? If it's not actively making them more money, for a lack of better words, it's very hard to get buy-in, especially if you're dealing with these large, very bureaucratic corporations. It's hard to get middle management to go take relative risk, right, on a new solution that they don't understand very well, for perhaps not as much upside, which is why you see independent oil and gas firms and the wildcatters be the first ones to kind of go do this type of activity. And so to really land on how do we frame this to the oil and gas industry, Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining is a tool for you to outperform in your core business, right? By be able to by being able to mitigate the flare, you avoid EPA or other type of emissions taxes that allow your business, particularly if it's an independent American, family business in which many oil independents are. It's a way for you to survive, right? If, especially with all the ESG kind of driven financing narratives over the last 5 to 8 years, getting loans to go drill wells was not as easy as it was before. And so
Hmm.
whether it's being able to improve your operations or defer kind of costs on the emission side, if it's old wells that you have that you would have had to P&A, which is plug and abandon, where if there's not enough gas to send to the pipeline, you have to just plug it, and that's a liability. But the market where, for example, the upstream team really like stands out is being able to put those hash huts on those wells and extend their livelihood, extend those royalty payments, extend those leaseholds for those oil and gas companies. And that's a needle mover, right? And so it also like helps keep the decentralization of the American oil and gas industry versus just kind of having forced consolidation because now people can't afford to keep their wells. And so it's a tool. It's a tool for American oil and gas and global oil and gas, but really within the lens of Texas, American oil and gas to kind of keep thriving, in a future where perhaps there's a little bit more headwinds than not.
This is such a great perspective because one thing that I didn't fully understand until I spoke to Charlie Spears and I
Hmm.
interviewed him for the Bitcoin Miners Almanac.
Yeah.
He comes from an oil and gas family in Oklahoma. And one thing that I really didn't understand is that when I thought of oil and gas, like everyone else, I thought the thing that comes out of the pump and a, it powers my truck, but a bigger truck drops it off. I assume it comes from a refinery.
Hmm.
But I never put the pieces together that it's actually almost more like real estate in a way,
Yes.
where there are actually a lot of small and mid-size operators that own wells, sets of wells, in the way that you might own a bunch of apartment complexes, or
Hmm.
you might have mastered a specific type of single family home, and that's
Right.
the kind of well that you get your minerals from. I had never perceived that that was the reality of oil and gas. And it was like this light bulb going off because all of a sudden I'm looking at Bitcoin mining and going, oh, dang, Bitcoin mining is actually the same way. There's not going to be this hyper consolidation. But what's so interesting about the point that you're making that
Yeah.
I'll return to is that what you're saying is that Bitcoin mining is actually this competitive differentiation to keep the industry from being sucked into the mega operators
That's right.
because it allows them to stay competitive. Am I
That's
hearing
right.
you correctly?
No, that's good. That's correct. And Charlie's awesome. He's by far, if there was a Mount Rushmore of oil and gas mining, he that would be definitely there, as just a
Dude's a
great
freak of
friend.
nature.
Yeah, amazing,
You
amazing,
you
amazing.
think you know him in one thing, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, we used to run like a resale shop." You're like, "What?" Like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna do this stuff with the ordinal
Yeah,
stuff." Like, "What?"
that's right.
Like, "Oh yeah, check out my band." What are you
Yeah,
talking?
yeah. We're playing on Thursdays. Yeah, come through, right? Yeah. It's very inspiring in that manner. But the TLDR, right, or the tweet would be oil and gas operators who integrate mining into their company will outlast companies who don't. That's it, right? And a very clear example is like, let's use emissions cost, right? I think it's like 900 up to $1,500 per ton of CO2 equivalent of wasteful emissions, right? And
Oh
if
wow.
and the only at the end of the day, the only people who can afford to participate in the forced carbon market that exist are the large operators. It's ExxonMobil, it's Chevron, it's the foreign national oil companies. They're the only ones who can just accept that tax. They're like, okay, it's the cost of doing business. I can spread it across my economics. The people who can't afford to do that are your third generation family, in Oklahoma, in West Texas, in Wyoming, who don't have that option and also can't, and they're getting strong armed by the midstream company to pay them an arm and a leg to interconnect their well,
Mm.
right? And so Bitcoin mining is that third option that they didn't have before. And so that's, instead of being forced to sell my oil and gas interest to this private equity firm who's then going to go sell it to Exxon, I can now continue to, keep my way of life because I have this tool that I have. Yeah.
Here's a dumb question for you. Does the integration of Bitcoin mining as a flare mitigation strategy and then consequently as a way to reduce emissions start to remove demand from these kind of boondoggle carbon trading markets? Like, is that a future that exists
Yeah.
one day where Exxon goes, forget about this, man. Let's just get rid of the carbon trading department and
Yeah.
not emit any
Yeah.
carbon.
Yeah. I think we would have to get to a certain scale, right? And I think there's other interests, that exist on why or why that may be. But I do think common sense will go towards the solutions that actually make a difference, right? If you're taking this flare and you're mitigating it with a generator and then powering it with Bitcoin with a Bitcoin miner, you can measure all of that, right? You're like that's an engineering exercise, and you can account for that. While if you're kind of doing your hokey pokey, hey, we did this with scope 3, we're putting this much CO2 in the ground, which as a geologist, the same way that you don't know if that CO2 might leak out somewhere else, right? There's always risk in the
Mhm.
subsurface. And so I do think that when it comes to impactful things that you could do, mitigation of wasteful emissions, mitigation is definitely the thing to I would hope the Exxons of the world would lean into that regard.
Are we gonna see Giga start to eat a little bit of that market? Where are you guys building to? I feel like every time I turn, I just saw a video on your site of
Yeah.
your transformer lot in California, which I didn't know you had. I was so excited to see, and it's old news at this point in time. I was so excited to see your What's Miner, your mobile hydro units, which I
Yeah.
think were one of the first in the market outside of a few direct partnerships that What's
Sure.
Miner had. What are you guys building? Where are you going? Well, yeah.
Yeah.
First off, how big are you? How much have you guys grown? Are you 20 people? Are you 70
Yeah.
people? Are
We
you
we are 80 people, I believe, right now. I think we're hiring a person a
wonderful?
week. And if you're interested, if you guys have fiat mining skills across marketing, engineering, product, logistics, whatever it may be, we're hiring. We're looking for great people who understand Bitcoin and understand, what it is to kind of throw the ball hard at a growth company. So that's my plug. Happy to talk to anybody who's interested. We're around 80 people right now. I was around employee 15 when I joined at the beginning of 2024. So lots of growth. It's been very exciting. HQ's here in Houston, but we have really expanded. We have a presence on the East Coast. We have our switchboard manufacturing facility, which is super cool, is in Long Beach,
No
California.
kidding.
We have an office in San Francisco as well. And so, we make different things in different places. Obviously, with the tariff turbulence that's happening from a supply chain perspective, we've benefited from having redundancy in our supply chain across Southeast Asia and the Middle East and other places. And so, we work on projects in different parts of the world, and different solutions will require, sourcing from different places in that regard.
Where do
If
you think you guys are? Oh, sorry, you're saying.
No, 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 go ahead. No, no, I was just going to say, we can talk about hydro in a little bit, but the air cooled has been a lot of fun, and it's been really, really interesting to see how that kind of technology has grown. But man, am I really bullish on hydro. The more I learn about it, every time I see kind of the iterations, and it's such a like a very niche part of like how much hash rate is hydro right now, right? I couldn't give you a number, but I only know that it's going to grow from here. And so that's definitely a very, exciting part of the projects that we're working on.
It's huge. And it's exciting to see it. It's sort of like you're boiling the frog. Everything is happening all at once, and there's going to be some inflection point because you're going to see. There was just kind of a tease from Block saying that
Yeah,
they're about to open source a miner,
yeah, yeah,
and you go, okay, well that's cool to the general person, but if they do that and they do that well, the unbelievable second and third order effects that will have for the whole industry are not accounted for or priced in any way,
no,
shape, or form. The kind of stuff that Giga is going to be able to build if you have an open source machine that you can start with is unbelievable. I'm curious on that front if you've seen that news. Where where are you guys thinking in the next 2 3 years? Where's the puck headed for Giga? Because you've done such a good job innovating through the space since your inception. Do you have a sense of where things are moving? Because they are moving so quickly.
yeah. No, I would say a couple comments there. Yes, things are moving fast, right? Across, you know, traditional CNI, Bitcoin mining, the AI HPC space, which we're also serving. All those spaces are moving super fast. What I would say that the main topic that comes to mind is modularity, right?
Mm,
Solutions are becoming more modular, being more efficient, almost more building block-esque. And so, if you're looking about Bitcoin mining and kind of the open source initiatives that you mentioned, it's very exciting to think that, not only can we build solutions for all of these closed sourced OEMs, which kind of are the incumbents, but what type of solutions can we come up with if we flip our engineering principles from OEM design to the rest of the cooling system and electrical system to what's the most efficient way to cool and power a chip, and then solve and solve for that, and then bring in the open source lens to it. And so we think that modularity is going to be a big part of it. I think that's going to be small and large, right? For all the home miners, right? As an example, I think that's people don't really understand, or perhaps think about just the surface like area of, if you had a mining solution that helped optimize around your water heating at your house, how many
hmm.
houses in the US, like what does that mean, right? And from that perspective, all the way to, if I'm running a power plant and I can reduce the amount of heating that I have to do for the boiler because I have a closed loop, an integrated loop system with a hydro kind of unit outside. Man, that gets other stakeholders really excited, because those are challenges that, if I'm a township in Northeast Ohio or in Maine, where like winter is a real problem, I now have a solution that impacts me in a completely different way. And so I think that's the way we're going. I think being modular is the way to do it, especially with like kind of the wonky supply chains that we're having right now. Being open source and being modular are kind of going to be our friends going forward.
Man, that's one thing that I've loved about about Giga from the start is that you always, as a company, I've noticed that you guys bias very, very hard towards acting really intentionally about what you build and then being very, very, very open to feedback. I
Oh yeah.
remember, I don't even know how many years ago it was, but it was like between two conferences in a row where at the first conference you had some of your air cooled boxes. And then by the next conference, you had your air cooled box, but there were like four changes to it. Like
Yep.
the intake louvers had changed because they had a shape that didn't allow the water to come in a certain way. There was a certain kind of hot cold barrier adjustment that and I just remember thinking like, holy smokes, these dudes are like, you're not getting too caught up in making everything like beautified or ultra expensive. It's like you just want stuff to work, which I thought was so fantastic. And it's very cool to hear how that's become this kind of modular mentality. We're running up on our the end of our stream time. Mario, this has been amazing. We're super super excited to have you come in next week. You're going to be facilitating a really really important conversation at Thames 25. Are there any kind of final thoughts, questions, things that you want to leave out to the audience and the ether leading into that?
I would no, first of all, Rob, really appreciate for having me on. Huge congratulations to the work that you and the whole Bitcoin Park initiatives are doing. Super excited to have you down here in Texas. I'd leave everybody with, the future is modular, the future is fast. Giga wants to be part of it, and we want to do a lot of that here in Texas. And so, looking forward to seeing if anybody's going to be at Thames, find me. I'll be there with my team, and happy to really just dig in and chop it up. I appreciate it.